Good morning. Hello, my name is Mark Dahl, and I've been blessed to be Craig Whitney's friend for approximately 40 years. I would like to thank Lori, Meredith, and Matt for allowing me to speak today. It is an honor to talk to you about Craig and his family. I met Craig in 1982, introduced by a mutual friend who was supporting Craig for his first run for political office, and thought that I might be interested in supporting him in his race. Craig was a 22-year-old and loved politics, but was a novice at running for state office. But Craig had confidence, and he was sure he was going to win. My wife, Julie, and I decided to do a fundraiser for Craig, so we held it at my father's home. We had a good turnout for the event, but Craig spent most of his time with a young lady named Lori, who was also working in politics as a campaign staffer for Congress, danker for Congress, who didn't pay you very well, Lori. Lori was not planning to attend because she was afraid she would be asked to make a donation. Their children, Matt and Meredith, are happy that she did attend, and as they say, their meeting at the fundraiser was the start of a beautiful relationship. Craig and Lori lost both their fathers at an early age and were raised by strong mothers who gave them love and support. Craig's mother, Eleanor, was a red-headed firecracker that enjoyed people and loved to party. She made everyone feel welcome at her home or at family gatherings at the Whitney's favorite Council Bluffs restaurant, Pizza King. Craig adored his mother, and we all loved her. She was the life of the party and loved to talk about her brother, who was a Budweiser beer distributor in Decorah, Iowa. I always thought Eleanor should have been the owner of a beer distributorship. You could not say no to Eleanor, and Craig inherited her powers of persuasion and enthusiasm for life. August Busch, the owner and CEO of the largest brewery in the world, Anheuser-Busch, in 1960, coined the company motto, "Making friends is our business." I believe that Craig Whitney perfected that motto. Craig Whitney easily made friends, and more importantly, he made a personal connection with them that was genuine. And his career took him from Washington, D.C., working in the White House, traveling the world representing our president or vice presidents, or working with one of the largest private equity companies in the U.S., or meeting with world leaders at the Olympics, or talking to the staff at his favorite restaurants. He made a point of making friends and making people feel special. Craig loved going to great steakhouses like the Palm in D.C., St. Elmo's Fire in Indianapolis, El Charles in Scottsdale, or his favorite, Old Ebbitt, across the street from the White House. An evening with Craig at one of his favorite restaurants was an event, and I always enjoyed the experience. His work at handling upcoming trips for the president and VP were nothing short of amazing. He made plain auditoriums, hotel ballrooms, or outdoor venues a place that would energize the crowd and inspire people. Many of you may not know that Craig loved magic and enjoyed performing if given a chance. Our friends here today from Fargo-Moorhead saw his magic as he put on very successful speaker series that brought in leaders in politics, sports, and celebrities. Over 3,000 people attended the latest event with Peyton Manning. The pictures of that event reminded me of one of his political events I attended in Washington, D.C. Craig always gave it his all and strived for perfection. I'd like to thank the Fargo-Moorhead Chamber of Commerce Board, staff, and its members, as well as the people of this great community for welcoming my friend Craig and the Whitney family to your community. He loved the people here, North Dakota State University, and of course, Bison football. As many of you might know, Craig was a huge Nebraska Cornhusker fan and attended many games with his good friend Denny Rash. He thought Bob Devaney was the greatest coach of all time. When Bo Pelini coached at Nebraska, he referred to him as his Bo friend. But I can tell you that Craig, Lori, and Matt followed the Bisons with the same fervor. My wife, Julie, and I attended a recent Bison game with the Whitneys, and I later made a trip to spend a few days with Craig. The number of people who greeted Craig as we made our way around Fargo-Moorhead was amazing, and their concern was for his well-being was heartwarming. I'd like to share some things about my friend Craig. He was a leader, daring, not afraid to take a risk, and someone who could persuade people to dare to dream and be their best. We all know he was a fashionable dresser and always prided himself on looking professional. But what you might not know is he learned that trait by selling shoes in high school and at working at Herman's Men's Store in Council Bluffs selling suits while attending college. I'd like to share a personal story about Craig. Craig loved to go boating. On a beautiful evening in Council Bluffs, Julie and I invited Craig, Lori, Jerry Banks, and his wife out in our little pontoon boat for a night of time cruise. Craig would always ask to captain the boat, but we all knew he was terrible at it. He was so persistent that evening to drive the boat that I finally relented. He then proceeded to hit a bridge, and in reversing the boat, almost capsized the vessel as everyone washed their shoes as they washed onto the lake. A few years later, he sunk my wave runner. So obviously, my friend was not a boat captain. In 2013, Craig, Lori, my family, and some of our other friends put together a trip on an 80-foot sailing boat to the Virgin Islands. The boat had a captain and crew, and again, Craig wanted badly to captain that boat. Craig, being Craig, made friends with the captain, and before we knew it, over our objections was captaining the boat and setting the course to the next island. Craig used his charm and persuasion to get what he wanted. Many of you know that Craig thought of himself as a great joke teller. Many of his jokes were a little raunchy, and some not very good. Jokes titled All of My Life, Connie Kachula, and his favorite, People ask me, Craig, do you smoke after sex? Would usually entail a long-winded story. He would not tell my children the punchline to these questionable jokes until they hit 18. On my son's 18th birthday, Craig told the joke, but my son was not impressed and told Craig he was disappointed to wait that long to hear bad jokes. Craig, being Craig, was unfazed and continued to tell the jokes to anyone that would listen. Now that I've told you what an amazing human being Craig was and his zest for life, I want to tell you the secret of his success, and that secret is not so secret. It is Lori, his wife. Lori is the rock of the family. As Craig traveled around the world representing our nations at an event in India, Europe, and all parts of this great nation, Lori kept the family moving forward, juggling the home finances, the family's home life, Meredith and Matt's accomplished athletic endeavors, and most importantly, moving the family to new locations in Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Phoenix, and to Fargo-Moorhead. She kept everyone and everything together. Lori, the outpouring of love for you and the family from your friends across the country and from the people of Fargo-Moorhead tells you that we love you, Meredith and Matt, and we will be here for you as you move forward with your lives. In closing, in my last visit to Fargo, my daily phone calls with Craig, I knew that his mind and heart were clear and strong, but as we know, his physical condition was declining. He was planning for his family's trip for his 60th birthday to Phoenix and the Chamber's next big events, and finally his visit from his granddaughter Parker. As I thought of those last visits with my friend, it made me recall Jimmy Valvano's famous speech. Cancer can take away all my physical abilities. It cannot touch my mind, it cannot touch my heart, and it cannot touch my soul. And those three things are going to carry on forever. Thank you.
Craig died during the time of year when we all hear references to the old story, A Christmas Carol. The main character, Scrooge, gets a tough lesson in what is really true and important in life, and it changes him. From then on, read the closing lines of the novel. He was as good a friend, as good a man as the good old city knew, or any good old city, town, or village in the good old world. Craig Whitney never needed a transformation to find out what was true and important in life. He knew, and in every season of his life, he was the same, kind-hearted, upright, fair, considerate, generous, funny, caring soul. He loved the world, and the world loved him back. I first met him at the White House in the summer of 1990. He was the deputy press secretary to the vice president, and I was the new speechwriter. Very soon, our friendship was cemented during a senior staff meeting when we sat across from each other, and Craig spent the entire hour trying to make me laugh. I am so grateful for these 29 years of friendship, and I was looking forward to many more. If I could tell him anything now, it would be that. The things Craig was least willing to speak about are the things I know best about him: the quality of his work, his reputation, and the warmth and respect that followed him everywhere he went. I got an early glimpse of his stature as we walked together down a hallway in the West Wing of the White House, and the President of the United States came around a corner and called him by name. It was the Bush family that brought Craig into politics and won his full affectionate loyalty for the rest of his life. And by general agreement, not just among Bush people, but well beyond that, he became one of the greatest advance men of all time. And now that line of work, advance, takes energy and talent that most of us simply don't possess. And to be the director of advance for the president or the vice president is about as challenging a job as there is in the White House. The president or the vice president doesn't do anything. I mean, he doesn't go to an event, tour a factory, visit a head of state, step out of a plane or a limousine, stand in front of a microphone, nothing, unless the director of advance is there and says, all right, let's go. The director needs to have the jeweler's eye for the tiniest detail. Most everything you arrange is going to be covered live, so it has to be perfect. And even if it's perfect, you never get a thank you. And you sleep only when you get to, not when you want to. You have to be presentable. You need strong people skills. You've got to maintain your cool in every circumstance. And you have to know how to lead a team and keep everyone upbeat and moving in the same direction. All these qualities were collected in the person of Craig Whitney, and they explain why he was the best. Oftentimes in politics, advanced people get a bad reputation. The advanced guy is the one who blasts into town and pushes his way around, and then the candidate comes through, and the event happens, and they all take off, leaving a big mess and maybe some unpaid bills. Of course, that's not how George Bush and Dan Quayle ever operated. They wanted their people to do things right, and they wanted to treat everyone in the right way. So Craig Whitney was the perfect fit. He would arrive sharp, well-dressed as always, upbeat, his presentation in perfect form. He prided himself on his creativity, and he understood the power of the visual in creating a strong first impression. He couldn't control everything that happened, but he could control how it looked. He couldn't control what people thought, but he could control what they saw. For any given event, his idea was usually unique, over the top, bigger than anything the locals had ever seen before. But he was so earnest and genuine and persuasive that everyone would go along and want to be part of it. Craig Whitney could sit down with a mayor or police chief and convince them that stopping all traffic and shutting down Main Street for a political event was the best thing that ever happened. And he meant it. And when it was all over, it turned out he was right. The candidate looked good. The press corps got great pictures. The crowd loved it. The locals were happy. And Craig Whitney left town a legend. And every person he dealt with felt like they'd made a friend for life. He was a natural-born leader. He wanted his colleagues to have a sense of mission, but more than that, he wanted it to be fun for everybody. The Whitney method was to set high standards, to labor at meeting them, and to enjoy every minute. As John Herrick put it to me, you could be tired and stressed out at 3 a.m. getting a site ready, and Craig would be right there, keeping the energy high and lifting you up. And if you didn't look or sound quite enthusiastic enough, he'd say, hey, what are you doing? Running for president of the Fun Haters Club of America? He was kind to one and to all. If a member of the team messed something up, he'd say, this is a mistake, let's learn from it. Everybody would move on, feeling good about themselves and good about him. Jay Allison reminded me that one of Craig's favorite phrases was, "Got a little surprise for you today." He always added in something special, something different. One time in Oklahoma during the '92 campaign, he staged a rally that concluded with what they call in the advanced trade aerial events. After Vice President Quayle spoke, the crowd was entertained with a confetti cannon, several thousand balloons dropping out of helicopters, and then parachute jumpers who were on little motorbikes. And when they touched the ground, they took off racing each other down the street. About an hour later, on board Air Force Two, the campaign budget officer came into the staff cabin and said, "Whit, I'll pay for one thing coming out of the sky. I'll pay for two things coming out of the sky. I'm not going to pay for three things coming out of the sky." Craig just smiled and said, "My friend, I understand. You do your job, and I'll do my job." It was all creative vision, and there was no end to it. He was proud in particular of a rally he did for George Bush in New Jersey. Beautiful day, outdoor venue, lots to look at. But Craig wanted music, and not just music, but a full mariachi band on a flatbed truck with speakers 6 feet high. He added a surprise, too. So that day, George Bush, 5,000 public, and the National Press Corps heard a brand new song, words and music by Craig Whitney, titled Jorge Bush para Presidente. Craig could manage people and motorcades and schedules and crises, sometimes all at once. I've seen him talk to 4 people at the same time, on the cell phone, on the car phone, on a borrowed cell phone, and on the ever-present radio with the earpiece and the little microphone in his shirt cuff. He always used that radio to announce to the whole team, "Great event, now on to the next one." And he always, always said thanks. In life, he went from success to success as an executive in Atlanta, Indianapolis, Phoenix, Fargo-Moorhead. Here are some of the things people have said to me over the last few days. I'm a better person because I knew Craig Whitney. My first boss said, "Wait till you work with Craig, you're going to love that guy." With Craig, it was black and white, no breaking the rules. Do the right thing, reflect credit on the president and vice president. I've never seen a White House staffer more loved and respected by the Secret Service agents. If you worked with him, he had zero ego, and he never made you feel bad about anything. What made him so good is that he was unflappable. I would follow that man anywhere. Vice President Quayle couldn't be with us today, but he asked me if I would share a few words from him. Craig was a true professional, a master of his trade, and a great guy to be around. I trusted him and relied on him year after year, and he never let me down. Politics can be a rough business, but in any weather, Marilyn and I could always count on his helpfulness and loyalty, and I know the Bush family felt just the same. Craig and I must have traveled 1,000,000 miles together. To know him was to like him. I'm thankful to him, and I'll appreciate the memories of many fine days in his company. Above all this, I will miss my friend. Lori, Matt, Meredith. So many of us friends and former colleagues have been talking these days about Craig and what he meant to us. We think of him as the ultimate family man because his happiest hours were spent with you, and every home you ever lived in was such a warm, wonderful, welcoming place. I lack the vocabulary to fully capture the deep sympathy that so many are feeling for you right now. Craig didn't like goodbyes, and none could be sadder than this, but he lived in the faith that promises reunion. So this parting will be only for a time. Not unexpectedly, the conversations I've had this past week have each proceeded like this, with disbelief and tears, and then reminiscing that turned into laughter. And if you knew Craig Whitney and spent any length of time thinking or talking about him, you're going to wind up laughing. And what a gift that is, a gift left to us by Craig, who was born on Christmas Day and who touched so many lives for the better. And something tells me that for all of us, this time of year will forever call to mind Craig David Whitney, as good a friend, as good a man as the good old city knew, or any good old city or town in the good old world.
Lori, Meredith, Matt, other family members, my heart aches for the loss of Craig. I know the chamber board and the chamber staff, their hearts ache for the loss of Craig. And I know our community's collective heart aches for the loss of Craig. Craig was a very unique man. He was a rarity. He was a gem, if you will. He was a man you felt privileged to know. And if you're lucky enough to have him as a friend, you felt honored. And you became a better person because of that friendship. I was lucky and honored to have Craig as a friend. My name is Doug Restemeyer. Lori asked me to reflect on the 10 years that the Whitneys have been part of the Fargo-Moorhead community, and I am so honored to do that. I became friends with Craig, I think, by default. Mark, as you heard, best friends for life with Craig. Mark's the Budweiser guy in Iowa. Craig and Lori moved to Fargo. Who are you going to call? You're going to call the Bud guy, right? So I'm not sure if that's just because Craig loved Bud Light, which he did, or maybe Mark just saying that I was an okay guy, maybe you want to meet this guy, and either way, we hit it off from the start. And it took less than a year for Craig to recruit me onto the chamber board, and where I served for 6 years, and including chair in 2014, I got to know Craig very, very well. And as any former chair of the board of the chamber will attest, you get to spend a lot of time together. Daily communications, possibly hourly. And I almost got to the point where I could actually decipher his cryptic texts. But if I were to sum up Craig in one short, simple sentence, it would be this. Craig loved his family, he loved his country, and he loved his community. And he lived his life in service to all of these. Our community was so fortunate to have Craig Whitney as our chamber CEO for the past 10 years. He was a man for the times, exactly what our community needed at that time, and he accomplished so much. Our chamber has become one of the best chambers in the entire country under Craig's leadership. According to the chamber staff, his mantra from the start was, let's take it to the next level. You can just hear him saying it, and boy, did he. Just to name a few things, he started Voices of Vision. He created the Women Connect, created committees for agriculture and professionals of color, started Honor Star, created the Young Entrepreneurs Academy, started Eggs and Issues. He amped up our lobbying efforts of the chamber. He took community builders from 7 members up to 54 members, and so much more. Craig was an inexhaustible visionary who wanted to always improve what the chamber could do for the community. He never stood still. So many of you know I have a strong affiliation with scouting. I think Craig would have been a good Boy Scout, and I think he would have been a good Boy Scout leader. And other than the camping piece, I'm not so sure. And I got to tell you, he would have wanted a custom-made uniform, not something off the rack. But the reason I would say he'd be a good scouter is he lived all the 12 points of the Scout Law. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent, right? Those are very descriptive words. Very similar to the words used by Mr. Michael Olson in his wonderful, wonderful memorial to Craig in yesterday's Fargo Forum. Michael, that was outstanding. Another motto of scouting is so apropos to Craig. Leave the world a little better than you found it. Craig challenged us as individuals and as a community to do more and to be better. He inspired us as individuals and a community to do more and to be better. And by doing this, he sure made our community a far better place for all of us. I started off saying Craig was unique. Some might use the word quirky. When you work and play with someone for so close for 10 years, you get to know things about them, right? And I thought I'd share just, I'll share 3 things that I learned from Craig that I try to emulate. First of all, Craig was the ultimate professional. When he was working, it was all business. He expected and he demanded perfection at every event and every publication that the chamber produced. He was always perfectly prepared for every meeting. When he presented, it was with gravitas. And of course, he dressed the part. I call him the poster child for Brooks Brothers. I never saw him eat at an event because he was too focused on making sure everything was to perfection and according to plan. Second, as you might expect with his background, Craig was, let's say, politically opinionated. But he never let his political view get in his way of getting things done that he believed were good for the community. He was a great listener, great communicator. He was a master at bridging disparate groups together. Now, that's not to say that over a couple of beers with friends at Pepper's on a Friday afternoon, he didn't let fly a few of his real thoughts. But I'm just saying that he always was open to hearing and understanding all sides. And that's certainly something that we could see more of and use more today. Third, Craig treated everyone with respect and dignity. He lived the adage, they will never remember what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Even though he traveled in the highest circles, John talked about his connection to people of substantial fame and power. He made a point, but I think it's actually more natural just for him that he would connect equally well with the doorman or the janitor. I always remember a trip with him, with Craig and John Reaver and a few others to D.C. So we're in the taxi, we're going to the Marriott, I believe it was, and we pull up to the Marriott, the doorman opens the door and says, "Oh, hello, Mr. Whitney, welcome back." We went to the old Ebbett Grill for dinner, same thing. Pull up, get out, doorman. "Well, welcome back, Mr. Whitney, good to see you." So here's the kicker, though. We go into the bar, and we're walking into the bar, and Mike, the bartender, he's got a Bud Light already cracked, holding a Bud Light, and saying, "Mr. Whitney, it's great to see you again." And of course, Craig, he gets that little smirk on his face, the one right there. And he looks at me and he says, "Yeah, I know, it's pretty cool." Doesn't have to say it. Because I'm like, and you got to understand, this has been years since he'd been running in those circles on a day-to-day basis. But it so vividly illustrates my point. Craig made all people feel good. You don't get that level of respect by treating people badly. So now just, balance things out here a little. There are a couple things Craig not so good at. You've heard a couple of them already, but uno one, texting. He was horrible. Great communicator, horrible texter. Incoherent, nonsensical. Abbreviations no one knew. I just found out the other day what R meant. I never knew what he meant. Some know that I don't really respond immediately to text, but if you didn't respond within a minute, you got the R, which My understanding is it meant respond. Might have had other meetings, I don't know. But you all know what I'm talking about here, don't you? And you know what? I think he wore it as a badge of honor, though, because, you know, he never really did try to get any better at it. But so second, Mark touched on it, but driving. He wasn't just horrible at driving a boat. He was horrible at driving a car. He avoided it whenever he could, right? Lori, the taxi service here. Little known quirk, he wouldn't drive on interstate. Legendary bad at parking. The chamber staff would take pictures of some of his park jobs. Tracy, Jim, right? And I hear he's even a terrible passenger. Jim can share stories about that. So lastly, pyrotechnics. Now, it's not that he was bad at pyrotechnics, he just was excessive. Craig loved fireworks. And next to Christmas, 4th of July, it reigned supreme. I would get such a kick out of him. We'd be talking about 4th of July plans and whatever, and you get that little smile on his face, and he'd pull out his phone, and he'd show me a picture of the mountain of fireworks in the garage. And he was just so proud of that. But you know what? I truly believe his love of pyrotechnics was really just his love of country. And that's also why his favorite song of all time, I think we all know it, God Bless the USA by Lee Greenwood. The pinnacle of my time with Craig was when we had the Clydesdales in town at the Red Hawks, and we had Lee Greenwood there singing God Bless the USA, and it was like everything. That was a perfect moment. But Craig was proud to be an American, and I think all of you, when we get to the song here in a few minutes, God Bless America, that we should just crank it up a notch. And he was a patriot. But you know, there's so many things I will miss about Craig. For sure, his sly smile. I love that picture. His wardrobe of corduroy Christmas pants. I'm talking plural there, from Brooks Brothers. His telephone calls. Those of you who get telephone calls from Craig from unknown, the only guy I know who's unknown. And his Friday beers that we had at Pepper's or Brutus. Past board chair, we'd have Christmas lunches at the Fargo Country Club. And of course, I will miss those cryptic text messages. There's so much to love about the guy. So I was just told a few minutes ago that the 4 mayors of our great community got together and they've declared today Craig Whitney Day. I think that's pretty cool. So just last Friday, we had planned to have a celebration for Craig at DS Beverages to honor his 10 years as chairman, CEO of the chamber. I had special bottles made for the event, of course, with Craig's favorite beer. I'm sure I'm about to break every funeral protocol here, but it only seems fitting to me. Of course, it's his favorite beer, Bud Light. Chamber CEO Craig Whitney celebrating 10 years. So if you'll bear with me, though it's totally unfair of me to have a toast here when I'm the only guy with a beer. Be happy to have one later. But I would like to offer a final toast to my friend, Mr. Whitney. Craig, you know, he left his beloved community of Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, and you like that I said it that way. He's now in the city of God, where he's going to make heaven an even better place. And so, farewell, my friend. Your life was far too short, but it was a life well lived.